The sound of buckling metal filled the air as Thesara helped to drag more Cybertronians onto the medical transport ship. As a physician, she ensured every last patient was aboard. Each day seemed harder to bear as the casualties mounted. Now evacuation sirens sounded, and the battle approached the treatment facility. After the last patient was aboard, she drug her feet and claimed to be looking for another. Not only was she reluctant to leave the only planet she'd ever called home, but there was someone she searched for in the fog of collapsing megastructures. They had said they would meet at the hospital before leaving. He gave his word. The transport crew called to her again, shouting that they needed to hurry. The battle was approaching quickly. Thesara then felt a familiar hum in her spark. She turned one last time to see a familiar silhouette forming in the fog. He had arrived and was safe. As metallic tectonics sheared through the city, they stood silent. No words passed. They hadn't needed them. Through the hum of their sparks came a synchrony that allowed them to communicate soundlessly. For the first time, they were truly split, she with the medical transport ship, and he with the communications ship. She took one last look at the crumbling planet as the medical transport ship lifted off, heading into the unknown vastness of space. Aroused from deep meditation by a proximity alarm, Stillknight stood to check the screen. Cybertronian energy signatures were entering the system, one at first, then two. The first signal was a larger ship, and it carried a Decepticon beacon. Stillknight twitched reflexively, then composed herself. The second signal carried an Autobot beacon, and in particular, the spark signature of a prime. Interesting, she thought. She had never seen the last of the primes, Optimus. Her hidden outpost had cloaking technology that neither faction should be able to detect. She had been stationed there since her training had ceased, but somehow the war followed her even here. Stillknight watched the screen and saw that the Decepticons and the Prime landed in different areas, both away from human populations. She would continue to monitor whether they would interfere with the native life there. This was her duty as a knight, to protect emerging life. The universe is full of technological civilizations whose power far exceeds that of younger, more primitive life forms. Time and again, advanced species, Cybertronian or otherwise, either exploited emerging life, colonized it, exterminated it, or let astronomical phenomenon wipe it out. The Knights of the Temple were formed by ancient Cybertronian thinkers and warriors who rebelled against the hubris of those civilizations, including early Cybertronian expansionism, colonial aggression, and the temptation to play God. Zephyrin used to say, "The greatest cruelty of advanced life is not hatred, it is indifference to what is still growing." It was the Autobot that first approached humanity, and so Stillknight left her cloaked base and took flight in that direction. As she approached, she saw that there was another signal approaching the system, headed toward Optimus Prime. As a cloaked and silent Cybertronian aircraft, Stillknight quickly located both Autobots. She found a high point in the desert plateau that allowed her to observe them. Much of what knights did was observation. While well trained in combat, many knights find their services are not needed for eons. Stillknight had a similar experience with Earth, where except for redirecting a large asteroid, she had not intervened in the planet's evolution, nor were her skills in combat yet needed for outside intervention. She had a feeling, however, that was about to change. Optimus Prime helped another Autobot from an escape pod, and they approached a roadway where human vehicles traveled. As Stillknight watched, they each chose a vehicle to scan, then returned to the small but somewhat larger pod. After some time, they managed to send a message out to other Autobots, inviting them to Earth. If Stillknight could sigh, she might have done so now. The Autobots seemed careful not to intervene with the humans or to give themselves away to them. There was one rotary aircraft that approached the escape pods after some time. The vehicle landed and appeared to speak with the Autobots, which was very interesting. Stillknight took flight to approach. There were no hostilities on either side. It seemed that the Prime had convinced the human that they were not a threat. Stillknight wondered how easily convinced humans were, because several alien aircraft had just landed carrying what appeared to be metal titans, and the humans were already a bit more at ease after speaking to the Prime. Stillknight hadn't really encountered Autobots much before. It was the Decepticons she always found herself cleaning up after. The Prime and the humans continued speaking for several hours, but there were no hostilities. Then the aircraft took flight and prompted the two Autobots to follow in vehicle mode. They transformed into a semi-truck and a rescue vehicle and followed the rotary aircraft to an old missile silo. Some additional rotary wing aircraft that were larger transported the pods there later in the day. Apparently the humans and the Autobots had come to some agreement. Stillknight always wondered why the Autobots were at such a disadvantage. Conceptually, their ideas seemed sound, and they had a prime on their side. Somehow, Megatronus could always sway people the way he wanted. He and his silver tongue certainly got further than Stillknight had ever expected on Cybertron. Now, their battle had come to Earth. Would this be the next planet destroyed in this endless war? With no further comings or goings from the missile silo, Stillknight returned to her cloaked base and continued monitoring all communications. As a knight of the temple, Stillknight was trained in deep meditation and combat. She decided that upon her return, she would enter deep meditation and let Zephron know that the Decepticons and Autobots had arrived on Earth. She wore the knight's armor that could only be donned by those trained in the Cradle of Sparks. It was the harmony of the spark which allowed the semi-sentient armor to respond, so any who followed the path of tranquility could wield it. The ancient spark-bound alloys in the weapons bond with the knight and their fighting style. The Cradle of Sparks was an organic, forested world orbiting a blue giant star. Low gravity and harmonic resonance aid in the meditative practices of combat. The blades of knights in training leave glowing trails in the air. The core of the planet amplifies spark energy for training, communication, and initiation rites. The knight's armor was said to be forged deep beneath the temple, the doors of which only opened during specific astral convergences. If wielded by an unworthy spark, the armor and weaponry lock into an inert form, becoming impossible to lift or activate. The knights prided themselves in their successful covert observation and minimal intervention strategies that had allowed their people to become myth to modern Cybertronians. Stillknight had recreated one of the meditation spaces similar to that at the temple in the Cradle of Sparks. The temple used ancient Cybertronian architecture that was cohesive with the surrounding forest. As in the temple, there were blue energon lanterns and several plants from the planet Icona that produced energon. She knelt down and entered deep meditation. She focused on the rhythmic hum of her spark and felt an ever so subtle rocking as the hum slowed and her consciousness left Earth to seek the counsel of Zephron. It was not always possible to communicate depending on the meditative state of the other party, but as she continued focusing on the temple to seek counsel, some familiar words echoed in the vastness of consciousness. They were the words Zephron once spoke to her after he rescued her from a crashed escape pod on a desolate moon. The sword is forged in heat. The healer must choose whether to harden or shatter. Whether it was her own subconsciousness or that of Zephron whom she tried to reach, the message was clear. The Decepticon-Autobot war was always the element most challenging to Stillknight's own path of tranquility. When faced with Decepticons or remembering what they had done, she had to be composed and stoic. Each time she tried, however, an incredible fury filled her spark, remembering all the patience she had once lost. Each time she remembered, it was an exercise in choosing whether to harden or to shatter. She calmed herself and found that hum once again. She focused on the slowing rhythm and came back to her path. It had been several weeks now since the Autobots and Decepticons had arrived on Earth. The Decepticons had focused primarily on mining energon from the planet, while the Autobots had found themselves 3 human companions. Stillknight had observed as RC had Jack, while 2 Decepticons followed. There was another boy who witnessed the fight between 2 Autobots and 2 Decepticons. Then the next day, another child also witnessed RC speaking to Jack near the children's school. As a result, the children spent much of their time in the Autobot base, which was the missile silo they had been granted by the government. Despite their interaction with the human race, the Autobots did not seem to threaten them in any way. In fact, they seemed to care for the children and protect them. On occasion, they would take the children on minor missions, especially the girl, Miko. While continuing to monitor the human and Cybertronian encounters, Stillknight had little concern when the Autobots were with them. She continued with her inventions to pass the time. Before and during the war, Stillknight had been a physician. Then, as a knight, she had additional training in being resourceful with primitive technology to create devices more capable of Cybertronian computation. As each knight operated on their own on distant worlds, it was necessary for them to have training in many areas. Stillknight's favorite to learn was exobiology. As a physician and scientist, she was naturally curious and enjoyed learning human medicine, both ancient and modern. What she found most interesting were the many points in history where physicians or scientists considered what was done before to be inferior in comparison to what was done now, only to find later on that they had been mistaken. In fact, it was often the ancient ways that were tried and true, connecting with the earth, living with the ecosystem and all of its soil, plants, animals, and insects. Stillknight found many ancient cultures to be somewhat similar to the Knights in their desire to protect each element of the ecosystem to preserve the planet's health overall. Many of these cultures also focused on meditation as the Knights did, bringing them closer to themselves and the earth that nourished them. While tinkering with one of her inventions in human medicine, she heard another proximity alarm. The screen read Jack and Miko, two of the human companions of the Autobots, with Agent Fowler, the human official who corresponded with Optimus Prime. They were being quickly approached by 4 Decepticon flyers. Stillknight did not read any Autobots in proximity. She took flight immediately. "Your mom said to bring you and Miko to the school for the college fair, Jack," Agent Fowler said in a frustrated tone over repeated protests from both children. "Agent Fowler, I'm not even sure I want to go to college. I mean, how can I be in college from an Autobot base?" Jack said. "And Jack's mom isn't my mom, Fowler," Miko retorted. Fowler then noticed something in the distance as they drove toward Jasper, Nevada. Was it birds? It looked rather large and purple. "What in the Sam Hill?" Fowler muttered, slowing the SUV. "Are those Decepticons?" asked Jack, eyes wide. Miko gasped and said, "He's working for the enemy!" "Jack, call Prime," Fowler said as he pressed the accelerator and began to take evasive action on the remote desert road. Jack dialed RC. The Decepticons began shooting near the vehicle, but Fowler continued to evade them. Then they began to land in front of it. "Jack, what is it?" RC's voice sounded through the phone speaker. One massive Decepticon picked up the vehicle, looking in at all 3 of them. "RC, it's Cons. We need backup!" Jack shouted into the phone he had accidentally dropped on the floor. The Decepticon turned the vehicle on its side, then removed the rear door from it, exposing Miko. Agent Fowler began threatening and throwing whatever he could reach at the Decepticon. One grabbed Miko, and another Decepticon grabbed Agent Fowler. Jack's heart dropped as he was still in the vehicle held up by the first Decepticon. Miko, though tiny, was putting up quite the fight, but as Stillknight approached in silence, both Miko and Agent Fowler were struck by some sort of electrocution device that rendered them both unconscious. The final Decepticon went to grab Jack, just as Stillknight had landed, transforming from her stealth vehicle mode to her bot mode. Jack's breath caught in his chest as Stillknight moved like a shadow. One blade flew from her wrist, a glowing disc that embedded itself in the arm of a Decepticon reaching for Jack. She then called back the blade and it re-entered her hand. Carefully but quickly, she collected the unconscious Miko and Fowler from the Decepticons she fought. Then, as she turned for Jack, the last Decepticon standing had him out of the van and struck him with the same current, rendering him unconscious. Stillknight's second blade struck the Decepticon in the chest, and she caught Jack's limp body. Stillknight replaced both blades on her back and cradled the humans in her right hand as a ground bridge portal opened. The Autobots poured in. Fully armed were Optimus Prime, Bulkhead, RC, Bumblebee, and Wheeljack. "Jack! Miko!" "Stand down," commanded Optimus Prime. "Release the humans." "What have you done to them?" RC shouted. "Let 'em go, Con," said Wheeljack. Stillknight calmly looked from them to the humans in her hand, scanning their life signs. They appeared uninjured, simply unconscious. She could wake them. She hit the 3 humans in her hand with a beam of light from her wrist. As this likely appeared hostile to the on-edge Autobots, their reaction was not surprising. In rapid succession, several shouts of "No!" were heard, followed by Optimus firing at Stillknight's left shoulder, Wheeljack throwing his blade at the same location, and the others rushing in to secure the humans. Stillknight surrendered them without protest, and they began to wake. Both Optimus and Wheeljack were at her sides now, holding onto her upper arms as Jack rubbed his eyes and said groggily, "RC?" "Jack, are you hurt?" she responded. "I'm okay." "Miko?" Jack said. "Present," said a sleepy voice. "I'm going to pound you into pulp, Con," Bulkhead said. "No, wait," Jack shouted. "She saved us." All Autobots, Fowler, and Miko turned to look at him. "Son, I think you bumped your head. I'm willing to bet my star-spangled shorts that pointing at Stillknight, is a Decepticon, Fowler said. Yeah, Jack. Just look at her. Definitely bad news, Miko said. No, she saved us. Look at the Decepticons on the ground. Do you think we did that while we were unconscious? Jack exclaimed. As the Autobots stood and processed the scene a bit better, the grip of Wheeljack and Optimus Prime loosened on Stillknight. Each wound on the Decepticons matched Stillknight's blades, glowing on her back. Stillknight casually removed the blade from her left shoulder and handed it back to Wheeljack. Thanks, he said. Optimus, who had processed the scene, then looked at Stillknight more closely and found an absence of both Decepticon and Autobot insignias. It appears we misjudged the situation. The injuries sustained by these Decepticons are consistent with your weapons. Your assistance is appreciated. Medical support will arrive shortly. I am Optimus Prime. Would you be willing to share your name? Optimus Prime said. Stillknight looked at him, and figured she could mend her own wounds. The Autobots in particular were low on energon from what she had observed. She turned to walk away. Wait! Jack shouted. Stillknight stopped and turned to look at him. Thank you, he said sincerely. Stillknight faced him, bowed slightly, and crossed her right arm over her chest with her hand in a fist, then transformed and took flight, leaving the Autobots bewildered. They all watched her leave for a few moments before Optimus asked whether anyone was injured. Just my pride, Prime. And my ride, said Fowler, looking down at his SUV. Ratchet, please open a ground bridge, Optimus said. The ground bridge platform flared to life, and the Autobots emerged with a limping Fowler, a quiet Miko, and Jack steadying himself against RC. Ratchet rushed forward, scanner in hand. What happened? Con attack, Wheeljack grunted, but they weren't alone. Jack has a concussion and went Looney Tunes, Miko said as she pointed a finger at her ear in a circular motion. Ratchet looked apprehensive as he looked from her to Jack and asked, Looney Tunes? I'm fine, Ratchet. The cons knocked out Miko and Fowler. Then we were rescued by some bot that looks like a Decepticon. Then I was knocked out before she was able to rescue me, Jack said. Jack thought for a moment about what had happened. She's a really impressive fighter, too. She took out an entire Decepticon unit single-handedly, and she came out of nowhere. She was just suddenly there, Jack said thoughtfully. Ratchet scanned Jack and Miko. They're stable. Mild bioelectrical disruption, but no lasting damage. She didn't even utter a sound, Jack said, still summarizing what had happened. Ratchet's eyebrows furrowed, and he tilted his head, thinking. A rogue Decepticon? Ratchet asked Optimus. Optimus shook his head slightly. Not likely. The Cybertronian bore no insignia resembling Autobot or Decepticon. Possibly an independent Cybertronian, Optimus responded. She did have an insignia, Chief, Wheeljack said. I'm not familiar with it, though. There are independent Cybertronians? Raphael asked. Optimus turned to Raphael. Before the Autobot and Decepticon war, there were many Cybertronians living off-planet. Some were travelers, explorers, scientists, and some sought out the exploitation of primitive life, Optimus said. Most of them presumably had to choose a side at some point, Ratchet said suspiciously. And perhaps this one did today, Optimus responded. I don't know. If you saw her, Ratchet, you'd say she's a Decepticon, Miko said. Would a Decepticon have kindly returned this to me? Wheeljack said, with the blade still dripping energon, much less after calmly removing it from their shoulder. You wounded her, Ratchet asked. A misunderstanding, Optimus replied. It looked like she was harming the kids in Fowler, RC said. Ratchet took a scan of the residual energon from the blade. A familiar data screen populated the console. It was an old file with a red marker. Thesara, physician, born of a split spark, deceased. In the final medical transport to have left during the exodus of Cybertron, Decepticon attack on a nearby vessel led to a collision with the transport. All hands lost. Escape pod was found crash-landed on the desolate moon, Tombstone Glacier, with no evidence of life. Some nonsensical rumors arose that she was rescued by the Knights of the Temple. No evidence ever emerged. Knights of the Temple? That's folklore. Nothing but ghost stories, Ratchet scoffed, incredulous to find the phrase on a Cybertronian official record. Optimus looked thoughtfully at the description. They're a myth. Fantasy. Preposterous, Ratchet said. Ratchet looked around for others to agree with him, but everyone else seemed to consider the statement thoughtfully. Hey, Doc, any way you could look up what the insignia is for a Knight of the Temple? Wheeljack asked. Ratchet shook his head and walked over to the Prime. Optimus, I believe of one thing we can be certain. There is no chance that Cybertronian is a Knight of the Temple, Ratchet said. There was a contemplative silence that followed. Do Knights of the Temple bow with their arm across their chest? Jack asked. And don't they allegedly have glowing weapons? Arcee added. And one trained as a physician would know how to revive life forms of the planet she's assigned to, wouldn't she? Wheeljack said. Assigned to? Bulkhead asked. Word is, one knight is assigned to a primitive rock to protect his life from outside influence, even if that outside influence happens to be Cybertronian, Wheeljack added. Ratchet, please search for the insignia of the Knights of the Temple, Optimus said. Ratchet did so, muttering things that sounded like ludicrous and nonsense under his breath. The Knights of the Temple insignia came up on the screen. That's the one, Doc, Wheeljack said, crossing his arms with a smirk. Is there any way to tell if this maybe Knight of the Temple is a real Knight of the Temple? Raphael asked. They're said to have an armor that only responds to them. Other than that, they seem to act pretty much precisely how ours did. Quiet, stoic, don't choose sides, but fiercely protective of the native life they're assigned to, Wheeljack said. Dude, when did you become an expert in Cybertronian myths? Miko asked. Going from rock to rock, you hear a lot of stories. Some call them ghosts, or ghost guardians. They're supposed to not really draw attention to themselves. This one, however, has got her hands full. I bet they didn't teach the Knights of the Temple how to prepare for an all-out Cybertronian war on the planet they protect, Wheeljack said in a tone of mild admiration. The Knights of the Temple are an ancient group said to have helped end a war long ago, a forgotten galactic conflict where Cybertronians tried to reorder creation in their image. The Knights ended that war through surgical, unseen strikes. Optimus spoke this time. But, Optimus, this is myth, legend, not reality, Ratchet said. It was the original 13 Primes that entrusted a small order of autonomous Cybertronians to observe, not rule, and to intervene only when necessary. This order consisted of thinkers and warriors that were said to have created a temple to train. The technology of the ancients is said to have allowed them to create an armor that binds with them somehow. It cannot be wielded by those that are not a knight. They fought for causes, not factions of war, Optimus responded. Ratchet looked at Optimus with doubt and disbelief. Jack stepped forward. Then, if she's a knight, Earth is her cause? Optimus turned slowly, gazing at Jack. Perhaps, he said. Perhaps Earth has had a protector long before we arrived, and we have only now crossed paths. Miko crossed her arms. Then she's got a bad taste in timing. No, said Wheeljack. She showed up at the exact right moment. There was silence again, except for the low hum of the base systems. In my lifetime I have not heard of any such knight, in certainty or in rumor, but everything we have witnessed and learned today would strongly suggest that there is one on Earth protecting humans. If so, while this knight may be unable to formally side with us, we share a common interest in protecting humanity, Optimus said, and a common foe.